So I wanted to make a quick video here talking about the Italian Vetterli 6.5 Carcano bolts. So if you read the book by Robert Wilsey on the Italian Vetterli, in the book he says that the method of converting these bolts from 10.4 millimeter to 6.5 millimeter involved machining out the center of the bolt to allow it to take a 6.5 Carcano cartridge. And that would mean that this is still one piece. Just machining out the center of the bolt here. And what I've noticed after having looked at several examples of these rifles is that that's not always the case. So out of all the rifles I have, about 45% of them have a bolt head that looks like this. I'm going to turn on a flashlight here. And you may have some issues seeing it, but there is a line here. And you can see it right there. And it's very clear that on some of these, the bolt head is a separate piece from the rest of the bolt body. Now, I've known about this for a couple years, and previously I had thought that these were either brazed or soldered on bolt heads, which was possibly done as a correction for headspace later on, or maybe a different style of converting the bolts. That didn't seem to make too much sense because that would require you to produce new bolt heads instead of just machining out the center of your original bolt, which seems like that would be more work and not make much sense to do. So recently I was shooting a bunch of Vetterlis from RTI, and I looked at one while I was shooting it and noticed that it had a bolt head like this, but that the gap here, the line where those parts were separated, was a little bit bigger than I would have expected it to be. It wasn't as flush as this one is. And I found out that these bolt heads are not brazed or soldered. They are, in fact, pinned. So here you can see what it looks like when you actually cut off the front of this bolt and you pin on a new one. So there's a small pin here, and that goes in right up here towards the top of the bolt where the extractor would ride. So I did take the extractor out of this one in order to get the bolt head off. I didn't take them off of these because it doesn't really show you anything, and these are pretty difficult to get off. So what they did apparently was they cut off the front of the bolt, they drilled a small hole through here, and they added a presumably newly produced bolt head onto here, and that just slides right in there. And then they pinned it in place. And this pin is pretty loose, so I can just slide it in there. And that gives you a bolt converted to 6.5 Carcano. So what's not clear is whether or not this was done as an actual method of converting these from 10.4, or if this was done much later on, possibly in preparation for these rifles being sent to Ethiopia in the 1930s to correct for rifles that had been used heavily and were walked out of headspace. So that's still information that we don't really know, but this is brand new information to me, and as far as I am aware, to pretty much everyone else. I've never seen any reference to these having a pinned bolt head. So previously I had been a little worried about shooting any of these Vetterlis in 6.5 that had a bolt head that looked like this, because I had heard of at least a few where people had told me their bolt head had a little bit of wobble to it. And assuming that it was brazed or soldered on, I was worried there was a possibility of it coming loose. However, now it's clear that these are not brazed or soldered, they are pinned, which means as long as your pin doesn't come flying out, your bolt head shouldn't really go anywhere. It's not just going to fall off, but just an interesting piece of information here, and just wanted to put this information out there for anyone else who has one of these and has noticed that their bolt looks like this and has a distinct separate bolt head. That is a pinned bolt head, presumably replacement.